April the 25th, 2026. Guys, you're looking at images from Turkey. This is Darren Kuyu. If you remember last year, I did a video, maybe 2 or 3 in the series of Darren Kuyu and some other places that are in Turkey. Now, what you're looking at is an underground city, which is one of many. But this one would hold about 22,000 people. And if you go back to the first written text, the way this thing was brought about, according to that, Ahura Mazda, who was the head god, and you see him depicted many times in carvings floating in a spacecraft. Got a beard, got the craft with the legs and all. Anyway, Mazda told Yima, one of the leaders of the people, that a major disaster was coming. A winter so strong that it would last for years and years and years, and for them to dig this out to save the lives of the people, because nothing would be able to survive on the surface. Well, just like the Ark, but in a slightly different way, but the Ark did land very close to this place, and I think that has a lot to do with some of the other statues. Anyway, what I'm getting to is, after the Younger Dryas and all that, guys, they came out. They were preserved. It's kind of like the Hopi, ant people, taking them underground to save them during chaotic earth changes. And that's what I think we're about to see. Now, the reason I'm going here, again, we did the video series, and what you and I have talked about, this is episode 4 of Ancient Intelligence. But we've talked about in each episode that you guys that have been here 15 years or 10 or 5 or 2, we've all shared information. And we went through it together, learning and digging into it and sharing it and trying to wrap our heads around whether it was from CERN or from the sun. It didn't matter. History. It didn't matter. We went through it. Now, we didn't know there was a pattern being set up that where the pieces of the puzzle would start fitting together in these times. But our Father knows what he's doing, I guess, because it seems like that's exactly what has happened. Now, the title of the video is How to Survive the 5 Months. Now, what am I talking about? Yesterday, in that video, guys, we talked about locust, bottomless pit, and the sting. Remember that? If you didn't, I'll have the link to 1, 2, and 3 in the description of this video and in the top comments pinned. Anyway, now let me say this. Revelation 9 is a worldwide event. And so when I say something about the drone situation with the U.S. and locust, then that, first of all, they call themselves that. It's like the Vatican calling their telescope Lucifer. If you name it that, people are going to, react to it. So whoever's in charge of it, I mean no harm, but you did name it locust, okay? But what my point is that every nation in the world now is really building and developing more and more high-tech drones. Ukraine is even selling them now. Russia has them. We have them. China has them. And, guys, there was a drone incident not too long ago down in Texas by that Air Force shot down by a laser. Anyway, what the point was that as we go back and look at yesterday's video, I talked about the Locust Army being an army of drones. And we talked about the capability of the U.S. military. Now, again, it's every military now that is developing drones. It's going to be like a satellite war and a drone war all combined in one. And by saying that, here's what I mean. It may not be the U.S. or Locust that is doing the deadly events like we talked about, taking control of people, and and you can't die. You want to die, but you cannot, because via the satellites, the drones, your vagus nerve is being controlled, that nervous system, and you want to die, but that can keep your heart beating while you're under the command, while you're that digital slave. And we talked about the fact that during the last few years, and maybe longer than that, a lot of vaccines have ended up showing some traces of metal. I told you about a good friend of mine that had a sore injection site, and then a piece of metal about 1 inch long came out. It wasn't the tip of a needle. It was rugged. It was darker. It was long, about that size, 1 inch long, but very rugged and dark. I don't know if you could break it. It was so hard. It was ejected back out. And that can form due to some of the, I guess, what's in the soup. So we talked about the satellites, especially Starlink. We talked about drones. Now, again, when I say drones, it's not just locusts. And when you're dealing with a situation like this, guys, you've got good sides and bad sides. Think about that. In other words, the U.S. drone system, regardless of who come up with that name, implying exactly what it sounds like, they may be the good guys. We may be the good guys in the whatever drone war, satellite war occurs. But it's going to be worldwide, and we see it, again, being developed very quickly, very high tech. And also, the U.S. is developing anti-drone systems. And that's a good thing if it gets out of hand, because drones can be launched from anywhere. And they've got devices now that just, these micro drones come out in droves, just like in the movies. Anyway, the vaccine and the metal in it turns your body into an antenna. And then, as we talked about, remember Ghost Murmur, the way that the U.S. found, and we're talking about the Director of National Intelligence, they found the down pilot from 40 miles away by his heartbeat. So, again, I said this, my son was in the Air Force 7 years, 2 trips, Middle East, and a ton of injections. And I'm sure, especially if you're an airplane pilot or jet pilot in the military, you probably have been injected with some type of metal or metal-forming substance that could trace you in case you were down. And that may have had something to do with the way Ghost Murmur worked the other day to find that down pilot 40 miles away in the crevice. It filtered out all the noise of the desert through that entire area, wind, everything, and picked up that one heartbeat. But in my opinion, again, via the vaccines, he already had an antenna in him. And it would be a good thing. It's like if you lose a puppy and, they got the chip in them, you may get them back. Same thing there. But it acts as an antenna. So we got that far, and I'm just kind of recapping because this is about surviving the 5-month period where the stings occur. And what we talked about, guys, again, was you got the great soul, then you have what's called the lesser soul that the Egyptians took advantage of to create zombies and slaves. It carried on into the Caribbean and Jamaica with the voodoo. But according to that process, you have your lesser soul is the animated one that keeps moving once the greater soul is moved. In other words, that lesser soul tells your body to move, but it doesn't have feelings or heart and a soul the way normal people do. And if you look at the pre-programming of what's Walking Dead, every zombie movie you ever seen, going back, guys, to Night of the Living Dead in black and white. What year was that? I was a kid. Anyway, that's how long the programming's been going on. And then if you get in that state and they control you, you'd rather die than have to go through that control, relentless control. But they won't let you because they control the vagus nerve via the link between the satellites and the drones and your antenna. So how do we survive it? Now, a lot of people had enough intelligence to try to avoid every vaccine you could. We talked about it back during those days. But sometimes you can be in an operation or where you're well, you're out while they're fixing a broken leg or whatever it is, heart surgery, what it is, and you don't know what you're getting injected into you. Plus, just a routine shot, like some type of steroid or something, for bad flu or cold, whatever they do. You don't know what's in it, and possibly the doctors don't know either. I'm sure the big pharma guys do. Anyway, so this is messages for both sections, both groups. The reason I'm here at Darren Couillard, let me change this image. Now, this is what you're looking at as a cross-section, just like you've seen those ant farms, right? 22,000 people. Look at the different levels. And it appears that possibly during maybe a warmer section of the year, you may could get out and do some cropping. But anyway, in this top layer, notice all of this was livestock. They knew they would need them to survive. Milk, butter, all of that, right? And the reason they were at the top, pretty easy to figure out, is because you see these vents. You don't want all of this smell going down into your living room, right? Pretty smart. But down at the bottom, guys, is looks like a river, underground river. All of this you can, again, I guess they would lower buckets or whatever, ladders, and pull water up in the times of the year they could not exit. And you see, it's pretty intricate. It's pretty cool, but again, Ahura Mazda told Yima, you can look this up, to build this because of that great long winter that ended at the end of the Younger Dryas. Could have lasted thousands of years. Now again, why am I going here? One more picture. Now this is inside Darren Couillard, and it says here, Sugu Kappa, or stone door. And you've seen them in the burial vault of Christ, which was much later than this time. This may be where they got the technology in Jerusalem. Anyway, these round doors could only be opened from one side. That's important. At that point in time, they were hiding from a winter, so this would minimize the cold air coming in. But later on, way after all that happened, and we were having some of the wars with Persia and things like that, this was used as a hideout, and that you could block with these stones, and you'd be sealed inside a fortress with access to water. And when they built all this in the initial run, they were told to make sure that they had the animals, like the ark, grain stored, all of that. So before that time right there when they were battling through Turkey, they would have a heads up that probably, or maybe year round, they stored here just in case. But now, how does it apply? This stone that you're looking at has a lot of volcanic makeup in it. It blocks frequencies. Now, do you understand where I'm going? This is going to be the way, probably the same way that survived that great winter and survived these wars through Turkey. This is the way that people are going to make it. Now, I'm not saying everybody run to Turkey, because we have these naturally here in the U.S., and they're everywhere. And what you want is something that, in this case, a lot of volcanic rock, a lot of quartz, and even the doors made out of it. And in this case, the door would be something to possibly block any kind of entrance, even a drone. And it would be easy to make it 5 months in something like this. But you've got Carlsbad, which, with the real popular ones are going to be hard to deal with, guys, because the National Park Service, things like that are going to, it's just going to be hard to do it. But anyway, there's smaller areas, and there's buildings that have a lot of granite in them and things like that. But with the drone technology via the Starlink satellite, first of all, they can detect your heat signal. Even if you don't have an antenna implanted, they can detect your heat signal if you emerge, and probably get close enough to put a little antenna in your butt. You understand what I'm saying? A little dark tone when you are now broadcasting and receiving. Then they control the vagus nerve system. You cannot die. But this volcanic rock makeup, guys, blocks that signal, even the doors, also the flight of a drone. And so it looks like this thing that was, this dwelling that was designed by Mazda, handed down to Yuma, is going to serve possibly for another worldwide cataclysmic event, and that is to hide from the Locust Army, which, if I'm correct, will be a satellite drone system controlled by the satellites. Again, what you would want to do is look at caves or places like that in your areas or close enough to drive to. If this happens, guys, you can never be 100% sure of anything, because only our Father knows, but you can be given information, and your whole life may have been wrapped around the study of this type of information for a reason. And Christ said in Greek, those that shall endure to the end shall be kept safe, safe, S-A-F-E. Now, and if you look at it in the English translation, it says they will be saved. In Greek, the original writing, it says, those that endure to the end shall be kept safe. Touch not my elect. Anyway, this was the point of the video. This is going to be the only way, I think, because of that 5 months of pure horror. Imagine it's so terrible that you want to die but can't. All of this was pre-programmed. You'll be a slave for one reason or the other. Harvest, work, until you work yourself into the ground. But the human has an energy field. So I don't know exactly what the situation will be. Will you be part of a zombie army if this happens to you? The things are so terrible in your mind, but your second soul cannot break from the frequency, the lower soul of the zombie. Again, that sounds crazy, but look it up in the Egyptian information, guys, and then look at Jamaica, the voodoo and all that. There's something about the human body that you can lose control but still be animated, and that's whatever you want to call it, second soul, lesser soul. That's how that works. You don't want to become a part of that. Now, I know it sounds a little bit off, but if you study the technology we've been looking at, this is episode 4 again, we've lined up from the sun through solar flares, energizing CERN, creating a 9 hertz vibration in Atlas, and found out today that even once we saw the CERN page live, and I was showing you where Atlas was vibrating at 9 hertz. And then today it was just a little lower, right at that perfect alpha point. Now, they had one cryo that sparked of all of the green signals that we see, and they shut down. But what I found out is because all these semiconductor magnets in the 17-mile loop, that information is stored there. Even if Atlas turns off, the vibration in that frequency is stored in those superconductor magnets. Think about that frequency. Why? That's going to be in part 5 because I'm still building that section, and it's incredible information. But again, when we're talking about a series like this and you start talking about what could happen, it's also good to have a exit plan or survival plan. Christ wanted us to make it, endure to the end. And there's a couple of different ways, from what I understand, how that could happen. This is the really physical way. And again, there's going to be people from all over the planet diving into places like this. Some of them probably are in sections the tourists can't go into, pretty well stocked. Just like you see these underground bases and underground storage facilities we have. And those big granite mountains, they block frequency too, that you see these, bases and things like that built into. And if we're looking at a drone war again, guys. It will be an international. And if you don't think that technology can be used for both good and bad, like a gun could be used good or bad, protection or, harm somebody or something like that. Well, any technology can be used the same way. And the ancient angel technology that was handed down, it's what the whole book of Enoch was about, that technology was on both sides of the playing field. One was using it wrong, one was using it right. For example, and guys, a reason I'm going there is because I get a lot of comments, BP, you're talking about the evil fallen angels. Well, who picked up Ezekiel in that craft? Was that an evil fallen angel? Why did Michael say that he had to fight 21 days, guys? The Prince of Persia. There's people on the same level on left and right. Technologies shared both left and right. Look, tell me one nation, whether they're good or bad, one political party, good or bad, one whatever, good or bad, that does not have the same technology. We all have laptops, computers, access, Starlink, all of that. You can use Starlink for something like what I'm doing right now. That's what I have. Or you could use it to control people. But when you try to classify everything into one basket, everything, all technology, all the craft, all the people were evil angels. Guys, there was 200 that came down and really committed the violation that got them in trouble. Read Enoch if you're not familiar with it. But just if it bogs you down, ask yourself, who was coming down taking care of Ezekiel and Enoch? What did Moses see? Again, both sides. It's like you have an evil nation over here, and they got jets and bombs and nuclear weapons, and over here, under some circumstances, we're just trying to be peaceful. Or anywhere, just compare any two nations. But you both have the same technology. So don't let me talking about things like this throw you immediately into that evil fallen angel narrative. We're looking at history, guys. Survival. So as we see these times coming, and I'm not a date setter ever, except I mentioned that, June 29th, events may start happening because CERN is saying on their website that's when they're going to shut down for 4 years. But guys, for 2 weeks before that, they're going to try to break every record they've ever set. Just see if they can max it all out. Because over that 4-year period, according to their papers, they're going to rebuild an even bigger or better machine. But we've talked about what could be trapped in it. The whole legend of CERN and the statue of Shiva. Of course, Shiva dances in creation, dances out in destruction, with destruction. But the portal idea of CERN, opening a gate. And in that situation, they're looking for ancient technology, ancient information, ancient intelligence. Now, when I say that, guys, remember, you got two sides of the coin. One good, one bad. Be fair about it. And if you can't, then again, just go back and read Enoch and Ezekiel, the other people that were involved in things like that, and say, well, that bunch didn't seem too evil. They were helping out a brother. So try to get that out of, I understand there are, but my encounter was 16 of these objects 100 feet over my head after 3 months of me doing videos saying I was going into Arizona and into Dulce to film and look for evidence, and they came 100 feet over my head and made sure that I saw them, and they did a wing wave and left, went over the Estrella Mountains and the Phoenix International Speedway. Highly polished bronze on the bottom just after nightfall. I've told you about it before. It was recorded by CBS News. The next morning, they were showing video from that night of 4 objects doing a formation. This is way after the initial 1990s Phoenix Lights. This would be like the Phoenix Lights 2. It wasn't as popular. But what happened, it was like a demonstration. And again, we just got to our son's apartment just off base at Luke where he was stationed. And we were right there at Litchfield and the highway, guys. 20, is that 20? And at his apartment, and there's a golf course. But we were looking south over the Estrellas. And you've got the Gila River there. To your left from there, and I'm talking to people there that know it, you've got the Phoenix International Speedway right before you get into the mountains. Well, we were on the balcony of his apartment, second floor, and we were looking south towards the Estrellas. And so as we looked up right over, when we were on second floor balcony, these things were maybe double that height above us. But what I counted was 16, flying in and out in a perfect formation like birds or fish. And the bottom of all 16, they weren't lights. It was like the energy inside of the craft. The whole bottom was glowing, in other words, bright orange, bright light. It's described in the Bible as highly polished bronze, these objects. And that's why I say you got watchers that are good, you got watchers that are not too good, and that 200 of them came down and ruined that earth age. Our Father had to wipe it out because the giants were consuming everything. Technology had become so loud. And what are we dealing with right now, guys? 5G is everywhere. I've done videos over the last 10 years showing you the EMF radiation on my cell phone inside my vehicles. But that was when we were dealing with 3 or 4G when I first started this, those particular videos. Well, we are surrounded, we're bombarded right now. And that is a cancellation of the low alpha waves like we were talking about with Alice at CERN. Now just it's kind of between a little plus and minus of 8 hertz the last time I looked. Perfect vibration. And for years, guys, I've talked about the God frequency and instruments like the high EMF, the big power lines, things like that. The noise blocks out the God signal. Well, when CERN shuts down, and look, a lot of that, let me back up just a moment. I'm not reading anything, I'm just talking to you. But the major events, remember the computer came from CERN, www. came from CERN. Why? Because they were going to have so much information, they needed a way to transmit it very fast. That's where the whole thing came from. That's where we're dealing with the AI, not artificial, but ancient intelligence. And it was stored in crystals before any of the things we've talked about, going back to Mazda, going back to any of those events, much older than that. And those crystals, remember in the Pyramid Wars, most of them were destroyed by the Enlil group, but he took some to preserve them. I think it said for information, they could control a landing, just like the tower at the airport. Things like that. These crystals had the information stored. But remember, in that section, it was not an airport, it was a spaceport. So that's how powerful they were. And we got crystals at CERN the same way. Crystal technology throughout now the new drone systems and the satellite systems. Interconnecting us in a complete web or a net, like the World Wide Web or the Internet. Big traps, digital traps. And that trap will be sprung by the technology we're seeing develop. It won't be something magic coming out of the air, some insects coming out of the ground. Real locusts, they eat plants. These are not going to hurt plants. They're not going to kill men, but they're going to torment them with a sting for 5 months. Get out of line and see if that sting don't get revved up just a little bit. You know what I'm saying? It goes back to just about every movie dealing with this information, every science fiction novel. And I've seen so many great authors going way back that took information straight out of the Bible. The stories, they just changed a little bit here and there. All of that information came from one source. But we are being shown some of the information now. And to be honest with you guys, it's not the safest type video series for anybody to do. But the drive is there, and so, I'm getting old. But we're going to continue this. So just to recap this a little bit, and really I didn't get real technical here because we did that in the first 3. But I wanted to go into the way that the people that will survive the 5 months, how you could do it even with an antenna injected into your body. You understand why I'm doing the video? Again, Christ said in Greek, those that endure to the end, they shall be kept safe. Looks like a good way to keep you safe, going back to the ancient Sumerian, their god that told them to do this. And just happens to be built out of the right material to block any frequency. People will survive in places like this. Turkey will, because they are very familiar with all the history, why it was built, and they still go there. I think they still have some type of maybe church services and things like that here and there, kind of like, a pavilion here. But this place is amazing. And one of the reasons I say that they may have started stocking this place is because Turkey may get involved in the Lebanon and Israeli conflict. We talked about that. And Turkey, pretty much, to me, it's clear, really clear to me, that is Gog. But so they already know they may be bummed by the IDF or whatever. But they're probably stocked. So, guys, there's not where we're at, there's not a lot of caves and things like that. There's a few, but there's not a lot of them. I don't know of any really big ones, but in some places there are. And one of the things I found out, and one of you guys in the comments, I hadn't went back and dug it up, and I don't remember your name, but I've seen you there many times, and I want to thank you, said that I think in the mountains you live in, on the East Coast, it's almost all granite. So keep that in mind. That's a block. And the other compositions of the rock in that area, places like that, and when you get into a mountainous area, somewhere there's crevices and cracks and caves. First thing people are going to say, well, BP, that's kind of extreme. Well, it is. So is Revelation chapter 9. And just think back, guys. We've been on a journey for 15 years on this channel, talking about a lot of different things. But in the science and technology field and history in the Bible, they seemed almost like different, that they were not really connected. But now we're finding out they are all connected. And by your exposure and my exposure, we have been primed to understand this. Your ears and eyes have been opened. So if there's something you don't understand, and I'll link to all 4 parts, but also study for yourself. Revelation 9, take a look at it, but most of you know it. And all I'm trying to do is shine a light on what some of the symbology is in that event. When you hear the sound of the wings mentioned in Revelation 9, it will be millions of drones. And I think there will be a drone war between nations, because right now it already is. Russia, Ukraine is selling, I think it's to Saudi, one of the nations right there, drones. And again, the U.S. is developing technology possibly tied in with lasers to take down drones because they know the threat. So again, I think they give us names like Locust and Lucifer, things like that, just so they can sit back and laugh because of all the stories that are coming up around it. I honestly do. I think they get a big kick out of it. You can't blame them. Anyway, But this technology will be a planet-wide, and it will be an event. If you can tell me a better puzzle or a different outlook on a puzzle like this, going back to all of what we've talked about really for 15 years, and think about this drone technology with breastplates of metal, 5 months of torment you cannot get away from. You cannot die. They control your nervous system, the vagus nerve and everything, heartbeat. They know where you're at. They know if you step out of line, you could probably get a pretty good shock. You may kind of like a heart attack, and or like maybe getting hit with a taser. You'll be saying, "Don't tase me, brother. Don't tase me, bro." Is that what they say? Anyway, that's what I would say. Please don't tase me, bro. Anyway. It's too late. You're already implanted. And for the ones that are, think about what the video is about. Why did the oldest civilization in this earth age, with the oldest known writing, tell us about how this was built, why it was built? And now we see after that event, and maybe many wars, uprisings, whatever, and now here, in this time, a sanctuary, a fortress, an escape. Think about it, especially if you have easy access, people like to get out and build a cabin or something like that, or, get away out in the woods in the middle of nowhere, which is the perfect dream. That's why I live where I live. I'm not in the mountains, but if I could take 11 dogs with me, I would do more traveling now, but I got my hands full, if you understand. Anyway, and I would never leave any of them anywhere. But if you're in those areas, why not think about it? Suddenly we start seeing events happen and drone swarms going everywhere, but you kind of built your niche, a little getaway and maybe a little survival food, water, things like that, in a place like this. And think about this door. Now, it's very heavy. I don't think a human could maneuver it very well, but again, it's accessible and balanced. It's got a hole in the center of it. I think they put a piece of wood, a pole or something like that to maneuver it from that side. But if you're on the outside looking in, you can't get a grip on it. Same as the tombs in Jerusalem. Again, I think that's where it's not far from Turkey. And there are caves in Jerusalem, look it up, that are crystals. And you look up crystal caves on the planet, guys. It's amazing, South America and other places, the crystal caves. But those will be the arks when this event occurs. But men's heart will fail them because for what's coming, they didn't realize suddenly they're not in control anymore. They laughed about getting that vaccine and put a magnet on their arm and all of that. But now you're being tracked. If you don't have that, you got a cell phone. You can get rid of the cell phone, which, guys, I don't use one anymore. This is my communication right here. I used to, I don't anymore. One thing is the EMF radiation, but also the tracking, and I don't have time for it. When I did have one, I would call maybe to get a price on a part or something like that, not a call and talk, and that's just not for me. Anyway, if you got the phone, you can be tracked. Remember that. Even if you don't have the, what. But inside this, it may not work, but it may. Another thing, guys, you remember when the IDF, or Israeli Defense Force, was it in Lebanon, possibly Syria? Everybody's cell phone started blowing up in their face because it had went through the hands there, first in Israel, and then with a push of a button, it blew up on you. With the technology now being planted in, and if you got to say it, and Kings of the East, that builds a lot of electronics, things like that. and they are not really the friends of our nation, they could easily do that. You could be hiding, but once you stuck that head out, you're going to get a little surprise, and you'll be tracked immediately. So again, though, you got to think about all of that. Even the door would need to be frequency blocked. This storm would be, without enough people, impossible to move unless you, again, it took a lot of people to put it there, but it's balanced. But there's other ways. There's newer technology also. But this is what they had then, and again, it's hard to build a shelter for 22,000 people to last that long. Everything was planned perfect. This was one of the first arks in this Earth age. Anyway, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I think I made my point. Start looking at ways to avoid what is coming, the locust army. I didn't write that book. Okay? It's a heads up, guys. Be safe.